Welcome in. I've got Scott Shuttleman Phillips with me here today. And Scott, it's good to have you back in Bryan, Ohio.
Well, it's great to be back. You know, this is my birthplace, actually. Born in 1959 at the Cameron Hospital. Actually, my mother and I had to spend 2 weeks in the hospital because she had a gallbladder attack. So she had me, and so I stayed 2 weeks, and all the nurses fell in love with me. And so I'm kind of known at Cameron Hospital because I was 27 inches long and had a Band-Aid on my finger. So, and I had dark hair, I needed a haircut. So it's great to be back here in Bryan.
You have an accent that is not of Northwest Ohio origin. So obviously you didn't spend all your life up here in Northwest Ohio.
Of course, I was born, like I say, here in Bryan, but then my father moved us to Montpelier. I'm a locomotive there, and I spent from first grade all the way to the 8th grade. And then my father moved us to a place called Huntsville, Alabama. And so I did my high school there and got employment at the Marshall Space Flight Center at an early age. And so, but I did pick up some of that y'all stuff. You can't help to do that, but that's what I did.
It's amazing how that all works. And I being a guy who spent my early years in the radio business down in Alabama, they always made fun of us Yankees going down.
Yeah.
And, you know, you were either a Yankee or a damn Yankee in those days. You were a Yankee if you're down spending your vacation money and going home, and you were a damn Yankee if you're going to hang around and buy an apartment or a house down there.
That's right. In fact, there were bumper stickers down there that said, "A happy Southerner's a Northerner going back north on the bus." So that's what we used to see when I was down there. And but they used to ask me to speak Yankee for them in school down there. And so I was kind of a unique person there.
And you've been down in Alabama now for 35 years,
well, actually,
roughly?
About 38 years I've been down there, and spent 33 years at the Marshall Space Flight Center. And, of course, I had to go south to meet a northern woman to marry.
Isn't that amazing?
She's from Michigan, so I was fortunate to do that.
That's amazing how that works oftentimes.
It is. And I wasn't even looking for it at the time. She just came past me and I said, "Now there's a woman right there. I'm from Michigan." I said, "I know."
You could tell.
I could tell.
Now, even being a Buckeye, though, that was okay by you? You're good with that?
Well, yeah. You know, of course, Ohio State, kicked butt last season, I think. Alabama folks, you know, and I kind of strutted my stuff down there and, you know, said, you know, we're Buckeyes, we're bad. You know, we've always been good football players, so I got a little bit of respect.
Yeah, I bet you did. You got a lot of respect.
I mentioned it more than once. Trust me. I'm from Ohio.
Well, that's fun. Now, you're back up in this area right now because you have a new book out.
I do. I'm actually on a national book tour. I wrote a memoir with my wife, Diane. We spent 3 years after I retired, after 33 years, of course, on the shuttle program. The book is called Removed Before Flight. And so our publisher has us on a national book tour, and I thought the place I wanted to kick off would be my hometown of Williams County, because I learned the values of hard work and a good work ethic and honesty and integrity here in Williams County.
It is a wonderful place to be born and to grow up.
It is. In fact, that's why I take my sons with me, because they are seeing now why I do what I do. Sometimes they say, "I don't understand why Dad talks that way or thinks that way," but now they do, because I really feel it's important to inspire people to do the right things, to be prepared in life. And I had an opportunity when I was 10 years old, when we landed man on the moon in '69. I was inspired to attach myself to something larger. Didn't know how to do that other than the Williams County mindset of being prepared, and that means doing your schoolwork, being honest, and doing right by people and having a good work ethic. So when my father moved us away and an opportunity presented itself, I could honestly seize that opportunity, and I parlayed that into a 33-year ride on the space shuttle program.
That's amazing. Reading in the book, because I got a chance to go through it a little bit last night, it seems like your dad around this area really didn't find something that he wanted to do or fit him real well.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, an opportunity to go south. He packs up the family, because there were a couple of siblings in that family as well, weren't there, huh?
That's right. My father was sort of a CPA, kind of crunching numbers, and he didn't see the lucrative competitiveness of it. In other words, he just didn't make enough money to feed 5 kids and a wife, so he felt sales was going to be more to his liking and making a little bit more money. So he went kind of where the jobs were at to make that money. And Alabama was a place that really was a starting point for him to actually have his own business eventually. And he was very, very successful in the city of Huntsville. And so he left a wonderful legacy for my mother, and my sister today, my youngest sister, Susan, actually runs the business that he started 30 years ago in Huntsville. And so my father left a wonderful legacy for his family.
I got a kick out of a couple of stories in the book, especially because he went down and was in the perpetual care cemetery business there for a little while.
Yeah, he actually had to go to Florence, Alabama initially with the company that he worked with to actually get a actual cemetery. It was a memorial park out of bankruptcy. And of course he was sent down there to kind of take care of that, and then found out there was all kinds of shady things going on, and they ended up had to fire all the people and they had to rebuild it. It took him 3 years to do it. He actually did so well, he actually worked himself out of a job. The company was satisfied, and they sent him up to another property, and we had to leave Alabama for about a year. But Dad loved Alabama, and we loved Alabama so much that he moved us back to Alabama after that year and started his own business. And we stayed there ever since.
Now, when you look at the book and you see the title, "Removed Before Flight," and we'll get into that title here in a moment or two. But right underneath that, it says Scott Shuttleman Phillips. And I think initially the idea would be, well, what shuttle was he on? You start to go through your brain cell as to which one of the astronauts was he at that point in time. But you were in an entirely different aspect of the space business, weren't you?
That's right. In fact, being in Huntsville was, if people know their history, the Marshall Space Flight Center was formed back in the 1960 as Werner von Braun as the first director. Now, Werner von Braun was the father of the Saturn V that actually took us to the moon. And I was just astonished that I could work at that facility, knowing of the history of landing on the moon as a kid here in Montpelier and Bryan, that I wanted to attach myself. I knew then I was on to something big when I had an opportunity to be involved at the Marshall Space Flight Center.
How did you get involved then? How did you get that first job?
It was a very serendipitous thing, and the story is very serendipitous to the fact that my brother, Steve, 3 years older than me, served a 3-year hitch in Germany in the Army. And when we moved to Alabama, he actually ended his hitch the time that we moved to Alabama, so he had to go to Redstone Arsenal to receive his last paycheck. And within that last paycheck of his 3-year hitch of the military, there was a little note that said hiring for the new space shuttle program, veteran preference only. So my brother served 3 years, so he filled out the application and got hired. He worked on the Enterprise space shuttle and its vibration testing. Well, I just came out of high school. I just turned, I was 18, I just turned 19. And it turned out that I got accepted to Vanderbilt University in Nashville, and I got the letter accepting me, and my dad looked at me and said, "Who's going to pay for that? Because we can't afford that. It's too expensive. You're going to have to work." So I begged my brother. I said, "Is there any way I can get a summer job out there working on this new space shuttle program?" Because I think we only just knew about the orbiter. We didn't know about the tanks and the boosters and the engines and all that. He said, "No," he said, "that's all space people are all military types. You're not going to stand a chance as a high school guy." I said, "Please, please, please." And he said, "Well, I'll get you some application." I filled it out, dotted the I's, crossed the T's. And believe it or not, I got a call about a week later. And I was a half hour late because I got lost in the building. It was so big. But the guy invited me in, said he had to hire one more guy. And he asked me 2 questions. He said, "Phillips, do you work as hard as your brother? And can you learn?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You're now 89581. That was the quickest interview, and I became the youngest team member of the Space Shuttle's testing program. And so I had an opportunity to spend 2 years in the testing program working 7 days a week, 12-hour days. And it was a fantastic ride.
No doubt about that. I think anybody right now that has not been to Huntsville, Alabama,
Right.
and seen that space center doesn't really appreciate how big and how massive it was,
Right.
and probably still is now because it's been a number of years since I've been
Right.
back down there.
Right. Yeah, here again, being around the equipment, being around the facilities, the buildings were always huge. Of course, the equipment was foreign to me. Of course, even the lingo was very foreign. GVTA, MPTA, ISTA, STA. All these numbers were thrown. Letters were thrown out. But over a year's period of time, I picked up all the lingo. And but I really, deep down in me, loved history. And I knew that I was on to something big. So as the testing program started to wind down, there was the flight program coming up, and my stint was only to the testing. But the Williams County values that was instilled in me, and good work ethic and honesty and integrity, and you know what? Whenever I travel outside of Ohio, I don't see the common sense like Ohio people have. And they valued my common sense. So I got invited onto the flight program for 30 additional years.
That's amazing. Now, it seems like in reading the book, your expertise or your field of work every day was logistics.
That's correct.
But it was primarily for the big fuel tanks that you would see that were attached to that space shuttle when they were launching it into orbit. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's right. The external tank was 154 feet in length and 28 feet in diameter. It held 539,000 gallons of cryogenic temperatured fuel, liquid oxygen and hydrogen. And so we would have to build a brand new tank for each flight. So we had built over 138 tanks for the life of the shuttle program. And so I was involved in the, of course, manufacturing and testing of those vehicles. And we, of course, traversed inside the vehicle. And, of course, my claim to fame was I was the last technician out of the very first Space Shuttle's external tank before Bob Crippen and John Young took their maiden flight in 1981.
That was an amazing story, too, because refresh my memory just a little bit. They filled the tank up initially to see if it was going to hold whatever was going in there, and then they had to clean the tank up after they took that back out of there. And the way they did that was they basically put you on a little device and lowered you down to the bottom of that tank, which would, at that moment, as claustrophobic as what I am, had me screaming and yelling and crying like a little child. But they sent you back down there, and it was not the easiest job that you ever had in your life, was it?
No. In fact, the chapter that we start the book out, it's called Mudman, and what we did to simulate the liquid oxygen weight of 1.2 million pounds, because of the density of liquid oxygen is as such, we actually had to put driller's mud inside of the tank and then do stress analysis to make sure that the fuel on acceleration wouldn't pop the welds and bottom out the dome. So we put driller's mud in there, over 1 million pounds of driller's mud, and did a final check. And then, of course, obviously when we drained them, it was a successful test. The tank did prove its punch, and so we drained the mud, but there was residue. So they actually picked a guy, and I told you I was the youngest guy. So, let Mikey try it. So Mikey, me, was drafted because I was thin, skinny, and probably a little bit naive, but we had designed a tool to go down in the forward manhole cover and with a water hose, and I had a breathing apparatus on because there wasn't 21% oxygen fully, because it was in a confined environment, one way in, one way out. So as the story goes, is they lowered me by a boat crank, a boat winch basically, manually down to the center of the tank with a water spray gun, and as I got in there, my hood clouded over with mud, and I was 40 feet down, and my hose clamp came off of my hose for my oxygen, and I had no oxygen. So I radioed up to be pulled out immediately, and it took 15 minutes for them to crank me out. And I'll tell you what, if that doesn't grow hair on your chest, I don't know what does. So we start the book out with that, and then I go into my personal life at that point. So it's kind of the hook to the book a little bit.
Did you work for NASA itself, or you were working for a contractor at that point in time, right?
When NASA awarded the contracts for the external tank, it was a company called Martin Marietta, and that's the company that I worked. We were considered a prime on-site prime. NASA, after the Apollo program, had shifted mainly down to just a contracting organization, so they would contract the work out. No real NASA people, they only just checked your work. So we actually did the work, and NASA came behind us and just put their stamp on of approval. So NASA had changed from the old, where back in the old days, even people that cleaned the bathrooms were considered NASA. But in the new, to make the cost lower for the shuttle program, they took NASA personnel primarily out of it, with the hands-on, and they use them as sort of an overseer, and of course the money element, coming from the taxpayers. So they hired, of course, the Martin Marietta people as prime contractors. So I did work for Martin Marietta, which later turned to Lockheed Martin.
Okay.
So, but I was on site, and I was part of the shuttle projects office, and I dealt with many NASA people, including, of course, astronauts and things of that nature.
As you said, 12-hour days, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
It was full-time work, I guess you'd call that in today's climate.
The thing was very interesting. It was during the Carter administration when the economy was pretty flat. In fact, my father was struggling a little bit initially with his business because the economy was really bad. And I was bringing home paychecks of a pretty sizable amount at the age of 20, 21, 22, 23. I had my own automobile. I bought cash, type of thing. And I don't say that to make anybody feel bad, but during that time, the opportunity there was even double time and triple time to any people that know what that means. But what it did, it kept me from getting married. I actually didn't date much. I didn't get married until later in my life at the age of 35. So I was really kind of a workaholic because I loved the program so much. And that's why I was able to retire early, because I saved my my nuts a little bit for that. And I had that opportunity to save enough money to be able to write this book and to raise my family in an early retirement time.
There were so many successes with that space shuttle program, but you were also there for the two major failures, which I think we all saw. I can remember the Challenger. I was sitting at a restaurant at lunchtime down in the southern Ohio area at that moment, selling batteries for a living.
Okay.
And we were watching on the screen as the rocket took off to space and then just disappeared.
Right.
And you had two of those actually in your career.
We did.
Both times, I think they first thought, especially with the first one, what happened to the fuel tank, which is something that you made your livelihood on. But what was it like to be part of those two events?
Well, I tell you, it changed me as a person. I was 27 now at this time, and of course we had 24 successful missions. Of course, STS-1 was outstanding mission, and of course we were related with that, and of course in other missions, and we brought in new orbiters. Of course, Columbia was the initial orbiter, then of course Challenger. So when Challenger, of course, was our 25th mission, we had, of course, a teacher in space program going on. So we had Christy McCullough, which was a teacher in space candidate that actually got a chance to fly. We were all excited about that. The Marshall Space Flight Center was the first time that a teacher would be flying. We were in a situation where NASA had over really extended themselves with the flight rates, and we had sort of an autocratic mindset that NASA was demanding of us, and so some things slipped through the cracks. Unfortunately, we had bad weather, and those launch attempts that had been scrubbed several days before, and really no one thought that we would actually fly on a cold day, because we had no real reference of what the O-rings and everything would withstand. So, but bad decisions were made at the top that filtered down to the launch. I was involved in the aftermath, which was very devastating. I did meet my friend and hero now, Neil Armstrong. Wouldn't you believe? I come full circle. I dealt with him during the Rogers Commission and Sally Ride and all the other principals. So I actually learned the failure that we had was a learning tool for us in engineering, and so we got through it. It was a 33-month shutdown, but we persevered. We were, of course, 24/7, trying to redesign the booster, and we got to the other side, and we successfully flew in September of 1988, and so we got through that. But I think everybody can remember where they were, in 1986, and I was there in the middle of it all.
Man, I'll tell you, I can't imagine that. And I can remember that being so devastating because since you had a teacher on board, there were so many kids that were glued to a television set at school that day, watching that flight.
Yeah.
If that wouldn't have been the case, still would have been a tragedy. But I don't think you would have had maybe the same situation where everybody. It's like the Kennedy assassination. If you go back in my day and maybe your day,
that's right.
You know where you were when John F. Kennedy was killed that day. You can tell that story. I can right now to this moment, and I can do the same thing with that. I knew exactly where we were.
In fact, a lot of the talks that I give today, we'll always have it on a Q&A. We'll always have somebody ask about the Challenger disaster. So that becomes commonplace for me that I know that I need to talk about it. People do ask about that. So
the job was tough, but I don't know that anybody can understand how difficult a job would be when you have human life in your hands, like you did every time that rocket went up.
That's true, and like I said, people say we have to be 100%. We have to be 110%, and that pressure was pretty heavy on us because we were we had a lot of critical items that we had to make sure that got covered because any failure would be loss of vehicle. The shuttle itself was voted the most complex vehicle devised by man and still holds that title today. Over 500,000 parts have to move simultaneously at the same time. And so we knew the complexity of the vehicle, and it was a different flight. Every flight was not the same. We all had different materials, different people working on it, of course, different crews. And so what you saw going up very gracefully was really a 6 million pound brute of industrial equipment that we babied, but each one was unique, like a snowflake. And so the complexities, we always were very concerned about the ascend with the boosters on, and of course the SSMEs, or the Space Shuttle main engines, firing. But we never anticipated on the return of Columbia, when a piece of foam had breached the chine that was a reinforced carbon on carbon, which allowed hot gases to flow in and melt the infrastructure underneath. So the external tank was the cause of that, and that shut us down for Columbia for 29 months. That was very devastating, not only to the workforce, but it was devastating to me because I lost my father during that time. My father passed away. So not only did we, go through the time of the astronauts being they perished, that my father also died. And so that was a very traumatizing time for me. But here again, I learned that failure is our best teacher. And I had a passion, and my passion was that wood carving. And so NASA commissioned me to build a lot of commemorative shuttle models for VIPs and the families of the lost people. So that helped heal my heart, that I was able to help those folks out through my artwork.
Let's talk about those passions that were non-job related, because I noticed in the book it seems you have past your family, and we'll get to that in a minute as well, but past your family, it looks like Martin Guitars.
Bingo! Yeah, there you go.
And also building, and up on our website we will have some of the pictures of the different shuttles that you have produced for these different people. How did you get into woodworking at first, and then secondly, why a Martin guitar?
Whoa, boy! I tell you, that's a good question. Okay, well, how I got into woodworking was to my mother's consternation, is she'd buy a new broom and I would cut her broomsticks up to whittle. And she, very consternated, said, well, why are you doing this? I said, well, I go out in the yard and the trees are wet and I can't carve. I said, this is hardwood. And so she supported me there. She got brooms and I cut them up and I whittled and I turned on lathe and I learned how to use a lathe through my Uncle Jack Walker that lives here in Bryan, actually. He's still around. And so he gave me my first lathe, so I turned a broom handle on a lathe. And I was living out on Route 10 in Montpelier when I learned that. And then as I moved on in life and got employed I decided that, hey, somebody said, hey, you're from Ohio, you know wood. Can you carve a space shuttle model out of wood? And I said, well, I probably could. I carved one and it didn't turn out too good, so I ended up gave it away. But we had a guy that passed away, and they asked me to do one for a memorial service. So I carved it and I put my love in it. And when they gave it to the family, they all started to cry. And I was in the back of the room, and I started to thinking, this really means something to people. So I really got serious about it. And so my passion was born to make these one-of-a-kind space shuttle models, because it represents the beauty of the space shuttle's program, in a sense that they don't see borders in outer space. When they're in low Earth orbit, they don't see borders. And so I blend woods from all different continents. And so all the beautiful woods, there's 20,000 different woods available. So all these woods that come together like a musical note. And I do play guitar. And so I use an analogous to of a note goes in a certain place as a wood would. So these are one of a kinds, and so I got to be known as Shuttleman. And so here again, I made 450 of them during my career, and I'm still continuing to make them today.
Some of the folks that you made them for, obviously, some of the retired astronauts?
Yeah, in fact, I just did one for Commander Brian Duffy. Brian was a pilot and commanded 2 missions and piloted 2 missions. And so Brian wanted a commemorative for his grandchildren. So I completed that last month, so he has that. And of course, astronaut Jan Davis, she flew 3 missions. And Mae Jemison, the first African-American female, she actually received one of my models 2 years ago. And NASA Administrator Mike Griffin contacted me, and he wanted one for his office, so I just finished that up this year. And so, these are actually really symbols of excellence. So the image of the shuttle to people that worked in the world's greatest workforce, and I consider the space shuttle program as working in the world's greatest workforce. We rewrote the book of cosmology for the world through the Hubble, and we sent up for repair 4 times, and then we built the International Space Station. So when you see the symbol to the people that did work, it was always about people for me. It wasn't the hardware that was cold, hard, and fast and unforgiving, as we know through Columbia and Challenger. But it was always about people. It was about Sally, Sue, Bill, Tom that actually made it launch. So these models became a symbolic element for the sense of excellence. And they put it right up there with their Silver Snoopy Awards that the astronauts were issuing out. So I was very honored to fill that passion.
As rightfully you should be. All right, the Martins. Why the Martin?
Well, here's what happened. At the end of the program, can I tell the whole story? And I'll tell you this.
Sure.
And I don't know. Here's the whole story. The whole story is this, that NASA commissioned me to build. We knew that after Columbia that we were going to deactivate our beloved shuttle. And so NASA came and approached me about building a commemorative display to help the workers cope with the fact that the shuttle was going to be deactivated. So it took me a 2-year process. Now, I had a brainstorm. I said, well, President Carter, Jimmy Carter, was president during the development of the shuttle, and he is a woodworker, and he's a world-class woodworker. People may not know this, but he builds furniture. And I read an article that he had built a chest of drawers for $1.3 million because he was the President of the United States. So I got the idea to get President Carter to give us some wood from his workshop, sign it, and then I got permission by management to fly that piece of wood into outer space, into low Earth orbit. And then it would be brought back to me, and I would fashion it into a shuttle model. Well, as it turned out, we sent the letter, a formal letter to the Carter Library and the Carter Foundation, and they turned us down. For some reason, President Carter did not support us in that. So I was about a year into the project, and so I was looking for a backup, and I just saw a story where C.F. Martin Guitar Company, the oldest guitar company in the country, was celebrating their 175th anniversary, and they actually had the first American guitar sent up into space on STS-63 in 1994. And Pierre Truitt, the astronaut, brought it back and put it in their museum. That intrigued me. And of course, I'm a guitar player, and Martin guitars are world class. So I just picked up the phone and got a hold of a man named Dick Boak, and he's the third man in command as far as over the museum. And so Dick said, I love the idea. We'll send you wood from David Crosby of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young to build the model out of. So they took his ebony off of his guitar and sent it to me. And I ordered my C.F. Martin guitar at the same time with the shuttle inlay with John Glenn's signature inside. So I love the Martin Company. They supported us for the ending of the shuttle program. So today, if you go to C.F. Martin, you'll see my shuttle model made out of David Crosby's ebony in their museum by the First American Guitar Space Exhibit.
I'll be darned.
So just a happenstance.
That's amazing.
But they're great people there at Martin. And I play my Martin just about every other day. I'm not that good, but I will get it.
It's fun though. I'm an amateur guitarist myself, so it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to sit and strum a guitar every now and then.
So really, that's the story how I included Martin into the ending of the program. So,
do you think we will ever see the space program reach the heights that it did when you were involved for the 35 years?
Well, I sure hope so. The thing is I want to inspire. The purpose that, people ask me, hey, Phillips, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? I said, well, first of all, I really want to keep the flame of inspiration burning for human spaceflight through the legacy of the space shuttle program. And with the materials that I collected and the memorabilia, I was a memorabilia collector. I did do a lot of photography during the program behind the scenes, so I kept a lot of those photos, and those are in my book. I did get permission from NASA to use them, but these are photos that were not published by any other person other than myself, so it personalizes the book even more. I would like to believe that there will be an opportunity for this next generation, certainly my son's generation, to attach themselves to something larger than themselves in life. We live in a society today, a culture today, unfortunately, where young people today are inward looking. They're not outreaching out. They're inward looking, and that's going to hurt our culture, our society as overall. It's when we come together as a nation and have a common purpose is when we actually find peace and prosperity. And when everybody's out for themselves, we have chaos as we're seeing today. So there is a political element associated with the space program. I want to believe that the space shuttle was a foundation to build off of. I certainly am a product of the Saturn Apollo days of landing on the moon. I was the second generation. I would want to believe that there's a third generation person out there that will someday land on Mars.
Wow, that would be something, and you and I may never see that. More than likely, we won't be around necessarily on this planet.
Well, we'll see the beginning.
We'll
see the beginning of it. Marshall Space Flight Center is building a what they call the SLS, the Space Launch System. So anyone listening may want to go online and check out SLS, Space Launch System. It is a rocket that will rival the Saturn V in capability. What we need to do, though, is to establish a mission. There is no mission planned during this administration, so maybe the new administration that will come in the future will be futuristic and maybe plan a mission. And once we get in low Earth orbit, we're halfway there. So I think that the next generation, if they want to attach themselves to something larger, they're voters. They need to put people in there that are inspirational, that are futuristically in thought, and maybe we can accomplish that because Mars, if you think about it, Mars is a virgin planet. It has no languages, has no religion, has no music, no poetry. So we would be a Noah's Ark. So it would be very honorable for this next generation to start out a 5-generation way of settling that planet. So there's a Noah's Ark out there somewhere, and there's a Noah there.
Your book is called Remove Before Flight. It is a red tag sitting on the front. Yeah. The significance of that tag.
Okay, well, anyone in the military, of course, listening, it goes, well, golly, everybody knows what a Remove Before Flight tag is. But to the ones that don't, it's the number one engineered item to be noticed on any item such as a missile, a rocket, even a bomb. It tells the engineers or reminds the engineers that an item needs to be removed, like a pin or like a valve or anything needs to be removed that would damage upon launch. So it's just a reminder tag, and they've been used for many, many years, but they come in assorted sizes and lengths. But the space shuttle, of course, had its remove before flight tags, and I removed the final one before flight. And so it's an analogous to the fact that I was removed before flight. And I had a conversation with Commander Duffy, and he said he's going to write a book. And I gave him permission to use "do not remove before flight" because he actually flew.
There you go. Did you ever have the desire to get in that spacecraft?
Well, I've
and fly?
actually been in the shuttle. Of course, I've been in all the orbiters. Of course, check out and stuff like that. Of course, we'd go to the VAB, and we're down there playing around. We jump in, and put our clean room suits on, go in, but I'm actually deaf. I'm actually deaf on my right side, and so I initially started out for the military, and of course I was rejected because I have bad hearing on my right side. So I would have loved to have gone, but I felt what I did on the ground was just as rewarding. Guys would come back, and John Glenn and all these guys I got to be friends with, the way technology is with the movies that they brought back, they would debrief us, so we would see behind the scenes shenanigans and stuff, on the shuttle, and it was fun. But it would have been interesting. Yeah.
For anyone listening right now, where can they pick up the book if they're?
Well, of course, it's a national book, so you go on Amazon and get it that way, but you don't get a signature with them or a bookmark, which is a replica or really an artifact of the actual ribbon I pulled. And I even throw in an extra surprise, but so you can get it at www.removebeforeflightbook.com. And that'll go to my website, and I'll fulfill that. But it is a national. I'm going around the country on this national book tour, so you might be able to get it at a bookstore near you when I do book signings.
Sounds good. I'll tell you what, it's been a lot of fun. It's interesting always to meet a fellow Alabamian, okay?
There you go.
Ohioan / Alabamian.
There you go.
Okay.
Depending on what football team's winning, you're right. Yeah.
Exactly. And we wish you the best of luck, and it sure looks like life is going in the right direction for Scott Phillips right now.
Well, Jim, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and you're just a fine Ohio man. I just love you. Appreciate it.